There's a quiet moment that almost no one prepares you for. The moment when the messages stop. No argument, no dramatic goodbye, no closure, just silence. And strangely, that silence feels louder than any fight you've ever had. If you've ever experienced this, you already know. Your mind starts asking questions your pride refuses to say out loud. Is she thinking about me? Did I matter? Should I reach out? Before we go deeper, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Not because you're chasing answers, but because understanding human psychology changes how you experience relationships forever. And toward the end, you'll understand why this silent phase is often the most psychologically revealing moment between two people. Because when both of you stop contacting each other, something very real begins. Most men believe silence means the connection is over, but psychologically, silence is rarely the end. It's transition. When communication stops mutually, not blocked, not forced, both people enter what psychologists call an emotional recalibration phase. The external connection disappears, and the internal one suddenly becomes louder. Here's the part many men misunderstand. During constant communication, emotions are regulated through interaction. Messages, calls, shared routines, these create emotional stability. You know where you stand because contact reassures you. But once contact stops, reassurance disappears. And the brain does something fascinating. It starts filling gaps. Human attachment doesn't switch off instantly. Instead, memory becomes selective. The mind replays meaningful moments, unfinished conversations, emotional highs. Not because someone is weak, but because the brain naturally seeks emotional completion. This happens to both people. Silence removes distraction. And without distraction, perception changes. Small things suddenly carry weight. A joke she remembers. A conversation that felt ordinary at the time. The way you made her feel safe, or uncertain, or understood. Distance forces evaluation. And here's the truth most men were never taught. When neither person reaches out, attraction doesn't necessarily fade. Sometimes it clarifies, because attraction is not sustained only by presence. It is often intensified by absence combined with emotional memory. But there's another layer. Silence also activates ego protection. Both individuals begin asking internally, if I reach out first, what does that say about my value? Do I miss them? Or do I just miss familiarity? So instead of acting emotionally, people observe. They wait, they reflect, they test their own feelings privately. This is why mutual silence feels tense even without communication. Two internal conversations are happening simultaneously, unseen but emotionally active. And here's something important to understand gently. This phase is not a game in the manipulative sense. It becomes a psychological mirror. Without messaging habits or daily validation, what remains is emotional truth. Did the connection actually matter? Was attraction real or situational? Was comfort mistaken for compatibility? For many men, this silence feels unbearable because action has always been their way of solving uncertainty. Doing something feels safer than waiting. But emotional dynamics don't always reward immediate action. Sometimes the absence of pursuit reveals more than pursuit ever could, because when interaction stops, people stop reacting and start feeling. And feelings, when uninterrupted, reorganize priorities. This is the moment where curiosity quietly replaces certainty, where memories compete with independence, where attachment either weakens or deepens in unexpected ways. And whether you realize it or not, during this silent space, perception of you is actively evolving, shaped not by what you say, but by what your absence communicates. The real question is no longer who texts first. The real question becomes what happens emotionally when access disappears. After the silence settles, something subtle begins to happen, something most men never see because it takes place entirely inside the mind. At first, both of you experience relief. Yes, relief. The emotional tension that once demanded attention suddenly quiets down. There are no expectations to respond, no conversations to maintain, no emotional risks to manage daily. Life feels calmer on the surface, But psychological calm and emotional closure are not the same thing, because once routine disappears, the brain begins comparing present reality with past emotional experience. And this is where the real process begins. Human connection operates strongly through emotional contrast. When someone who occupied mental and emotional space suddenly vanishes, the mind instinctively measures the difference. She notices moments where she would normally share something with you, a funny observation, a stressful day, a small achievement. And without realizing it, your absence becomes noticeable, not because you demanded attention, but because your presence once felt familiar. Familiarity is powerful. Research in attachment psychology shows that emotional bonds often become clearer when interaction pauses. Constant communication can actually hide true emotional value because availability becomes expected. But when access disappears, appreciation either grows or dissolves. There is rarely an in-between. Now, here's an important truth. Many men assume that if she hasn't reached out, she must not care. But silence is often less about lack of feeling and more about emotional self-protection. Just as you may hesitate to message first, she may also wonder, does reaching out make me look vulnerable? Has he already moved on? Am I respecting his space or losing him? So instead of acting impulsively, people observe from a distance. They check indirectly. They notice changes. They become quietly aware of your emotional stability, even without speaking to you. And this is where your behavior during silence matters more than anything you previously said. Because when communication stops, imagination replaces reality. If your energy appears desperate, reactive, or restless, the emotional narrative becomes one of dependence. But if your absence feels calm, grounded, and self-contained, something different happens psychologically. Respect grows, not forced respect, not strategic distance, but the recognition that you are emotionally capable of standing on your own life. This matters deeply in attraction dynamics. Healthy attraction thrives when two individuals feel chosen, not needed for emotional survival. So during mutual silence, both people subconsciously ask one question: was the connection enhancing my life or completing something missing inside me? And time begins revealing the answer. Interestingly, emotional memory tends to soften negative experiences first. Arguments lose intensity. Frustrations fade faster than positive emotional moments. What remains strongest is how someone made us feel consistently. Safety, excitement, peace, understanding, or sometimes confusion. Silence allows those emotional impressions to reorganize without interference. This is why reconnecting after mutual distance often feels emotionally charged, not because feelings suddenly appeared, but because they were processed privately. However, there's another layer many overlook. When neither person breaks silence immediately, attraction shifts away from impulse toward evaluation. She begins wondering not just if she misses you, but why. And when someone starts asking why they feel drawn back toward a person, emotional investment quietly deepens, because self-discovered feelings feel more authentic than feelings pulled by persuasion. This phase transforms attraction from reaction into choice, and choice carries emotional weight. So while nothing appears to be happening externally, internally, perception is adjusting, emotional value is recalculating, and curiosity is slowly replacing certainty. Silence, in many cases, is not emotional disappearance. It is emotional clarification unfolding where neither person can see the other, yet both are being affected by the same absence. As time passes, silence stops feeling accidental, it starts feeling intentional, and this is the stage where emotions become more honest, sometimes uncomfortably honest. In the beginning, both of you may tell yourselves a simple story. We're just giving each other space. But the human mind doesn't tolerate emotional ambiguity forever. Eventually, curiosity turns inward. You begin asking deeper questions about her. She begins asking deeper questions about you. And something psychologically important happens here. When communication ends, control disappears. During active contact, both people subtly influence each other's emotions through responses, tone, attention, and reassurance. But in silence, influence is removed. No one can guide perception anymore. Only memory remains. And memory is powerful because it edits reality. The brain naturally removes emotional noise and focuses on meaning. Moments that once seemed small suddenly feel symbolic. Conversations gain new interpretation. Even misunderstandings are reconsidered from a calmer emotional state. This is often when a woman begins reassessing emotional safety, not excitement, not attraction alone, but emotional safety. She may reflect on questions she never consciously asked before. Did I feel understood with him? Was I relaxed being myself? Did he bring stability or emotional pressure into my life? These reflections don't happen dramatically. They appear quietly during ordinary moments when distraction fades. And here is something many men misunderstand about this phase. Silence removes emotional chasing. Without pursuit from either side, emotional motivation must come from within. If she thinks about reaching out, it is no longer because conversation is ongoing. It's because genuine curiosity or emotional pull exists. That distinction matters enormously. Feelings discovered privately feel safer to trust. Now, at the same time, you are undergoing your own psychological shift. Initially, many men interpret silence as rejection. The instinct is to restore certainty quickly, to message, explain, or reconnect just to remove discomfort. But if you remain emotionally steady, something changes inside you as well. You begin separating attachment from need. You start recognizing whether you missed her specifically or simply the emotional routine you shared. And this internal clarity subtly alters your energy. Confidence born from reflection feels different from confidence performed for attention. It becomes quieter, less reactive, more grounded. And even without contact, people sense this change over time because attraction is deeply connected to emotional perception, not constant communication. Here's the paradox. When both people stop reaching out, each person regains individuality. Daily emotional dependency weakens, and personal identity strengthens again. Ironically, this independence often restores attraction that routine slowly dulled. Why? Because mystery returns. Predictability fades, and the mind becomes curious again about who the other person is outside the familiar dynamic. Curiosity is one of the strongest psychological drivers of reconnection. Not pressure, not persuasion, curiosity. She may begin wondering how you're doing, not out of obligation, but genuine interest, whether you're growing, changing, moving forward. And at this point, silence stops being passive. It becomes informative. Your lack of impulsive reaction communicates emotional maturity. It suggests stability rather than desperation, self-respect rather than withdrawal. And this reshapes how she remembers the connection, because absence forces one powerful realization. Access to someone emotionally stable is valuable. When that access disappears calmly, without drama or resentment, it often leaves behind unanswered emotional questions. And unanswered emotional questions rarely disappear quickly. They linger. They resurface unexpectedly. They invite reconsideration. So while externally nothing seems to move, internally the emotional narrative continues evolving, shaped by reflection, distance, and the human tendency to revisit connections that once felt meaningful. The silence by now is no longer empty. It's becoming emotionally charged with interpretation. Eventually, something shifts beneath the surface. The silence is no longer about distance, it becomes about meaning. By this stage, both people have adjusted to life without daily interaction. The emotional urgency fades, routines stabilize, and outwardly, everything appears normal again. But psychologically, this is often the most delicate phase, because once emotional withdrawal settles, the mind begins testing conclusions. Humans struggle with unfinished emotional stories. When a connection ends without clear resolution, the brain quietly searches for understanding. Not drama, not conflict, just coherence. And this is where many men misunderstand what happens inside female psychology. A woman does not simply measure whether she misses you. She measures how your absence feels compared to your presence. If life feels lighter, calmer, or more aligned without the connection, emotional closure strengthens naturally. But if something feels subtly missing, emotional comfort, intellectual connection, shared understanding, curiosity returns in a deeper form. Not impulsive curiosity, reflective curiosity. She may notice that new conversations don't feel the same. That laughter lacks familiarity. That emotional safety isn't easily replaced. And here's an important psychological truth. People rarely miss perfection. They miss emotional uniqueness. the specific way someone understood them, the rhythm of interaction, the sense of being seen without explanation. Silence allows comparison without pressure, and comparison often reveals emotional value more honestly than proximity ever could. At the same time, pride and vulnerability begin interacting internally. Reaching out now carries emotional risk. Enough time has passed that breaking silence feels meaningful. It signals intention rather than habit. So, hesitation grows. Not because feelings are absent, but because they matter enough to protect. This is why mutual silence can last longer than either person expected. Both individuals may think about reconnecting while simultaneously respecting the distance that formed. And here's where your emotional posture becomes critical, even without communication. If during this period you focus entirely on waiting, monitoring, or hoping for her return, your internal world remains tied to uncertainty. But when your life visibly progresses, emotionally, socially, personally, something powerful happens psychologically. You stop representing unfinished dependence. You begin representing growth. And growth changes memory. She no longer recalls you only within the context of past dynamics. Instead, she begins imagining who you might be now. Humans are naturally drawn toward evolving stories. A man who appears emotionally stagnant feels predictable. A man who continues developing feels intriguing. This doesn't mean performing success or projecting indifference. It means genuinely reconnecting with your own direction. Friendships, purpose, self-respect, emotional balance. Because attraction often reawakens when someone senses they are encountering a person, not revisiting a situation. Meanwhile, internally, emotional certainty continues forming on both sides. Some connections fade peacefully here, replaced by acceptance. Others quietly intensify. And when emotional investment survives extended silence, it transforms from chemistry into conscious interest. At this point, any future contact carries different energy, less need, less reaction, more awareness. Because distance has filtered impulsive emotion away, leaving behind only what proved resilient enough to remain. This is why the real psychological game isn't about who waits longer or who messages first. It's about what silence reveals when external interaction disappears. It exposes emotional patterns, attachment styles, personal stability, and genuine compatibility. And by now, whether either of you realizes it fully or not, decisions are forming internally, not based on loneliness, but based on emotional truth discovered without influence. There comes a point in mutual silence where something unexpectedly peaceful happens. You stop checking. You stop wondering every day what she's thinking. You stop replaying conversations searching for hidden meaning. And slowly, your emotional world returns to you. This is the moment most men don't recognize as important because it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels calm. And psychologically, calmness changes everything. When emotional intensity fades, clarity replaces longing. You begin seeing the connection not through fear of loss, but through understanding. You remember what worked and what didn't. You recognize your own behavior more honestly. You notice where you gave too much, where you hesitated, where you genuinely showed up. And something subtle happens inside confidence. It stops depending on outcome. You no longer need reassurance that she will come back. You're no longer emotionally negotiating with silence. Instead, you become comfortable with uncertainty itself. This emotional independence is often misunderstood. It isn't detachment. It isn't pretending not to care. It's emotional balance, the ability to value someone without losing stability in their absence. And ironically, this is often when the psychological dynamic fully shifts, because when you emotionally release the need to control reconnection, your presence, even from a distance, changes meaning. If she thinks about you now, she no longer senses tension or expectation attached to your memory. Instead, she recalls someone who respected space, handled distance with maturity, and allowed emotions to settle naturally. That leaves a very different emotional imprint. People remember how safe it felt to exist around someone who didn't pressure outcomes. Now, here's the deeper truth few conversations mention. Sometimes after mutual silence, reconnection happens. A message appears unexpectedly, a reaction to something small, a simple check-in that feels almost casual, yet emotionally significant. And when it happens after genuine distance, the tone is different. Less guarded, more curious, more intentional, because both people have experienced life separately long enough to understand what the connection actually meant. But there is another outcome equally important. Sometimes reconnection doesn't happen, and this is where real emotional growth reveals itself. You realize the silence was never a test you needed to win. It was an experience that clarified compatibility, timing, and emotional readiness. Not every meaningful connection is meant to continue, but every meaningful connection teaches awareness. You learn that attraction alone cannot sustain alignment. That communication matters as much as chemistry. That emotional maturity includes knowing when to move forward peacefully. And when you carry this understanding into future relationships, something changes permanently. You stop chasing certainty. You start choosing connection consciously. You become less reactive to temporary distance because you understand that genuine interest does not disappear overnight, and forced closeness never creates lasting bonds. The real game that begins when both people stop contacting each other was never about strategy. It was about self-discovery. Silence removes performance. It removes persuasion. It removes emotional noise. What remains is authenticity. Who misses who grows, who reflects, who moves forward stronger. And the most powerful realization arrives quietly. When you become emotionally complete on your own, reconnection becomes a choice, not a rescue. Whether she returns or not, you are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are simply someone capable of choosing wisely. And that shift, more than any message or reunion, is what transforms how every future connection unfolds.